Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Urban Adams. I'm a wealth manager with Dynamic Wealth Advisors based in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me today, I have a guest from Senior Resource Connectors, Scott Fischer, who's going to talk to us a little bit about, as you can see on screen, storm clouds on the horizon. And he'll get us a little familiar for those who are outside of the Phoenix area, what that term at the bottom of the screen is. But I will give Scott the opportunity to introduce himself, and then we will get started with our presentation today. Take it away,
Hi.
Scott.
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. I am Scott Fischer. I own the options for senior living business and the senior resource connectors. I've been in the space of serving families, urban, for over 21 years, walking families through the challenges of typically an aging loved one. Oftentimes it falls into the lap of the adult kids when our parents need our help. And so at Connectors, we focus a lot of our education and outreach directly to those adult kids and, of course, those spouses who might be faced with the health issues of their loved one as well. So I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here. I love to talk about these issues and bring education to people.
Well, that sounds great, and I'm glad that you pointed out that this could be helpful on a number of different levels. Either those with parents who are approaching, the age where they, these things we need to be aware of course,
Yeah.
and then also for those clients who, whether they are single or with a spouse and facing that same possibility as well. So definitely, I think this is going to be helpful for all, and hopefully there's a lot taken from it. So with that, would you like me to move on to the next?
Well, I'll just explain the word, the funny word at the bottom of the screen. If you don't live in Arizona, you may not have never heard the word haboob. And really, what haboob is what we experience late in the summertime. Urban, you've lived here a while. You know that we get these crazy, wild, explosive monsoon dust storms often late in the summer where moisture comes up from Mexico. The desert heat is crazy hot, and we get 100-mile-an-hour winds and dust everywhere, mile-high dust storms, and it can be quite a mess. And I've used this analogy for years because um, so oftentimes families feel like, where did this explosive event happen where mom and dad are now having all these issues? And I've used that metaphor to kind of explain or bring a correlation and some illustration to what happens in people's real lives. And by the way, Urban, I am not only helping families for the last 21 years do this. My brothers and I are taking the um, joint responsibility of supporting and helping our mother who just moved into assisted living last week, and that comes with a whole different set of emotions and feelings. So this is very, very real to me.
Absolutely, and that something close to home for all of us, and you going through it right now with your siblings. And yes, thank you for clarifying on the haboob. I've
Haboob.
seen a good number of them in my years here in
Oh,
Arizona. Uh,
yeah.
Thankfully, most of them from indoors, because otherwise they can
We
be.
we got caught in one in North Scottsdale last year, and literally within 20 minutes, the 101 was totally underwater. The water was rising so fast that the Walmart over on Raintree and the 101, I had to get out of there because we were going to get flooded in, and it was like in 20 minutes, or it was that fast how
Yeah.
much that happened. Yeah,
Yep. Well,
yeah,
I'm certain that we'll tie that to those storm clouds that we may all be facing here in our life situations and what you're going through right now.
yeah.
Um, how would you like to get started with that? And
Well,
I'll
let me just, yeah, I'll just outline the objectives here. Thanks. And when I get to this, we'll just kind of move through the slides. But these are the things that I want to highlight for everybody, that life's changes are coming. We can't put our heads in the sand. We have to prepare ourselves for them. Lack of preparation leads to big opportunities for problems. Number two, we want to talk about some of the subtle changes that occur in people's lives so that we can interpret those changes as potentially problematic down the road. Number three, identify the greatest challenges for caregivers who may still be working Of course, they're family members. They may be members of a church or close friends with someone. There are challenges, and I could speak to the emotional, financial, physical challenges that we are experiencing just trying to help my mom. Um, how do I prioritize? That's learning to prioritize things. Sometimes it gets murky, and so you want to be able to set priorities for them as you're starting to reach out and get resources for help through the process. And I also want to leave you with how to access us, because we are at Senior Resource Connectors, a coalition urban of about 40 companies that all serve families from a different lane or a different point of view. And so we have a family advocate and an ambassador that talks and engages with families every day. And so when people need us at no charge, we can give them a game plan and a soft landing place when they need it, so that we can help give them and point them in the right direction when they need help.
Okay.
So next slide.
That
Yep.
sounds great. We'll get moving right along here.
Um, just the questions. So when I see stuff, how do I interpret it? That's sometimes we see things we don't even know what we're looking at, and so how can I interpret these changes? I think it's important for those of us that are in this position to recognize what our greatest fears and concerns are. For many people, it's financial. I mean, am I going to have to pay for mom? How much is that going to cost? Um, Urban, those are real issues. Did our parents save? And then here's the next question: are we saving enough to help ourselves down the road? And I'll let you address that.
Yes.
Um, how do I let my kids or my family know? People are people, and you know what? I don't like asking for help, and I don't like to tell somebody that I need help or I need things. And so shame can creep into the picture. And so I talk to families all the time, very gut level, about you can't do this alone, especially if there's some form of dementia or neurological condition like Parkinson's. You can't do this alone. You need help. And how do I let people know is a big thing.
Yeah.
Legal issues. How do I protect my assets? How do I have my powers of attorney in place? Do I have the right will or living will in place? I talk to people about their legal situations all the time and make sure those powers of attorney are up to date. And in the state of Arizona, we've got some unique laws around mental health powers of attorney. Super important to know that stuff.
I know that, and if I can pause for
Yeah.
just a moment on the questions, you mentioned Arizona. We're both located in Arizona. Many of my clients are, but however, I've got clients in California and throughout the rest of the country. I know that many of the things that we'll discuss will be maybe Arizona centric or Arizona specific.
Yep.
However, that doesn't leave out our viewers who are outside of the Phoenix area or Arizona in general. So if throughout your comments, if there are things that you might, qualify with a specific mention, whether that be other states or something that may be specific to Arizona, that'd be great as well to,
Yeah, absolutely. And as you and I were speaking earlier this week, as we were preparing for this morning, I've gotten to be well connected to a lot of guys just like me in other areas of the country, specifically California, Texas, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. So, Urban, if somebody's watching here and that is in any of those other areas, and some of these things might pertain to you, or you want some help or guidance, through us, Urban, we can connect your clients to those other um, trustworthy professionals in those other areas to give them a hand. Okay.
that sounds great.
Okay.
And you did bring up too with the legal issues. I think there's a separate webinar idea for me altogether to speak about those estate planning issues, because even though it might tend to lean toward the financial aspects, no matter what, it does have an impact on what we're discussing today for sure, and making sure that you have those appropriate documents in place there with the right individuals who are acting in your capacity as power of attorney or otherwise. And Yeah, so I'll just preview that somewhere later in the year we'll have that more in-depth in estate planning discussion, but feel free to cover that as much as you'd like here today.
Yeah, it's just it's a tough issue. I'll just give you an example. I'm working with a guy right now who has some early onset cognitive decline, Urban, and super proud. He was a professional. He was a former physician, right? He has some impairment. He is not what we would say legally is incapacitated. So even though his sister has financial power of attorney and there's people trying to get him to make the best decisions, it's still in his hands to make his own decisions because we value the liberty of our citizens, right? So we're trying to slowly and with trust build that relationship with to help him make the right decision for himself. And he's reaching out to his family to give him some support, but he still retains his right, even though there's some impairment involved. And so people have to understand just because you have a power of attorney on somebody doesn't give you the right to power up and do what you want to do on their behalf. So very, very important to have all these legal issues on the table and be understood. There's a, really from the pandemic on, the next one is about decision making and isolation versus socialization. As people isolate, they lose the ability to socialize. We're humans. We were meant to live in community. We were meant for human interaction. When we don't, we get internal. When we get internal, we don't always make the best decisions. So it's super important to stay connected to our loved ones and help them not isolate. Or when they do, we have to go into the cave to get them and stay connected so that good decisions can be made.
If I can
Yeah.
summarize a book that I read recently, and that is the one that's about that decades-long Harvard study. It's called The Good Life.
Mm,
And if there's one takeaway from it, relationships are what help determine that those who feel like they're living a good life, and it can be friendships, it could be romantic relations, whatever the case may be, those healthy relationships are what maintain or help people have that feeling of living a good life. So I think that only reinforces your comments in that yes, it is important to not be isolated, to have those ongoing relationships with friends and family and others, and make sure that those individuals who see you frequently or interact with you frequently are the ones who can better interpret those changes you might be going through.
exactly. Exactly. And it leads to the next one is, well, how and when do I have the hard conversations? I've been telling mom for years I would never do anything to you, always with and for. And you have to trust my motive, right? You have to trust my motive. I've been telling her for years in fear of at some point she would have some cognitive decline. Well, she's now struggling with interpreting and perceiving my brothers and I's actions. So now it's feeling like it's being done to her. But for the last 9 years, I've been telling her, no, 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 no. I love you dearly. I would never do anything to you, always with and for. And so earlier, the better on the tough conversations, frequently on the tough conversations, always packaged up with love so that it's because it's going to get tough and it's going to get tough. What if my loved one rejects or denies the need? Start early. There are some things we can do to help with families work around that or work with that. Um, but it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. Just like I'm telling you about the client we're helping right now pick out his assisted living. How do I honor my loved one when one perceives their independence is being taken away? And again, speaks to the doing, not doing it to, but with. And again, I say that to my clients. I say it to my mom. I say it to my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. It is my motive is to honor them and to even when it's super hard and frustrating. So I understand the depth of these questions and that's why I bring them up so that we can kind of move through those here through the rest of the presentation.
Sure. And one comment on those last couple of bullet points too is that uh, how, how often have you encountered and how might you be able to assist loved ones who their loved one is resistant to that need?
Well, as long as they are considered impaired but not incapacitated, um, we have to kind of ride with it. Now, if you think there's incapacity or a level of decision making is unsafe, and they've reached that point of capacity of incapacity, it might be time to see an attorney and pursue a guardianship. That's a hard thing to do against your mom and dad or your loved one, but it has been done many times on the benefit, for the benefit of the senior that's in that rejected state. But that's once they've crossed the line of incapacity. On the side, if they are still impaired but have capacity, then it's um, a lot of frequent contact, a lot of reassurance, a lot of trust building, and because most things that we do will be perceived as controlling, so we want to do things alongside them. When you and I, if I talk to my mom across the table, that feels confrontational to her. When I sit on the same side of the table with her, it feels the body language is important, the tone of voice, the pace of my voice, the intensity. I get very intense. And so she feels all that when I'm and she still has capacity. So she didn't have to do any of this stuff that we've done this week. She could have rejected it all. She's been resistant, but she's gone along with it ultimately. But it's because I think for 9 years I've been saying all the things I've been saying, and she really knows it deep down in her heart.
Definitely laying that groundwork well in advance of anything
Like
happening.
body language and our tone of voice and our inflections, the questions we ask, um, those are all super important parts to this on how we perceive with our loved ones. So here's, we wake up in a nice summer morning, we look outside, we go, well, how bad can today be? Right? You can just slide through this.
Yes.
How's it going? But the sky looks a little bad. And of course, denial is just put your head in the sand or head in the box like this picture. But go to the next slide here. What what is real is that here's the picture, Urban. You know this. If you look out from our home in the middle of town and we look out to the Southeast Valley in Phoenix, we're about a 100-mile wide valley, and there's mountains on each side of the valley. And when you look out to the east, southeast mountains, there might be two clouds in the sky. It's about 100 degrees. What could go wrong today? By noon, you might start seeing a few congealing or gathering of clouds. And then you look out there about 4:30 in the afternoon and you're like, oh my God. And you see these dust storms building, right? And
Yes.
they look like that. And lightning is crazy in the middle of these. And of course, because things are so dry, lightning leads to forest fires in our high country, which are terribly devastating, of course. And then down here in the valley, the desert burns, homes catch on fire, things like that. Um, most of our reactions is like, this can't be happening to me.
Right.
This is happening somewhere else, but not in my neighborhood. And,
Exactly.
and then you go, oh my gosh, look at this devastation. Where did all this come from? How are we ever going to get through all this?
And I think that that ties in very well when I saw the slide for the denial. Of course, having been through a similar situation recently, although it was much more short-lived, um, it was it was a situation where uh, denial has an impact on those who will ultimately assist and after. And that's really important to remember as well, is that no one's purposely trying to make it harder on their loved ones in this
Right,
situation.
right.
But the knowledge of, and again, going back to that, building that groundwork from the very beginning, is setting those expectations so that we don't end up, our situation doesn't end up looking like this slide, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Denial is really a decision. It's like, I'm going to decide not to deal with this. And so I'm not gonna until I have to. Um, for many people, and I'll speak personally too here as we go, when when in our 50s and 60s, we don't take care of our retirement investment needs and our business, right? what are we doing to our kids in 25 years when I need assisted care, or if I haven't purchased that long-term care insurance and paid my premiums, if I haven't set aside something to do my long-term care. In my mom and my dad, my mom said to me the other day, well, your dad and I never planned for retirement. I'm like, well, did you think you were living forever? I mean, they just never did. So of
Yeah.
course she has spent every nickel she's ever made and 10% more, you know. So the reality is then it becomes a family system issue where my brothers and I have to help her make up the difference until we can get her some assistance from the state Medicaid programs. And I'll talk about that too. But that's part of the devastation or part of the destruction of this. You're not paying attention to what's really happening here along the way. And then, yeah, you've got a boom, you got an explosion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Individually, they may not seem like a lot, but when they converge, all these clouds, financial issues, not paying attention to your oral health, not paying attention to your mental health, putting off this decision, man, when they all converge at one time, it feels like an explosion, like this haboob we're
Yeah.
talking about. The kids are often left in the dark, and so parents are, and a unique thing about our parents, Urban, is that these are the kids that survived the end of the Depression and World War II.
Yeah.
They weren't fighting it. A lot of those guys, the warriors that fought the war, are in their late 90s, and a lot of them are gone now. But these are the kids of those people, and so
Yes.
they lived through all that. So they're super proud, super resilient, super hard headed, which served them well, but also now it can be a barrier as they've
Yeah.
gotten. Yeah.
That second bullet point there really hits home. I had a client reach, during a regular meeting recently, and the topic came up of their own estate planning, and while they're still they're still both working and several years from retirement. However, they asked for my guidance or my suggestions on how to approach her uh, parent and step parent who live outside of the state to sort of open that conversation, because she was very concerned about being blindsided by some responsibility that she may have for them, whether that's being a successor trustee or whether that's financially responsible for some care. Was completely in the dark about that. And uh, while I won't say the lines of communication are completely open, it opened the door to that conversation, and now there is at least a dialogue going on there, so that she feels a little less in the dark about where her parents are at, and what expectations for her might be in later in life.
Yeah. And just another little, just a sidebar for the, and I've got life stories for everything just from my own life, and then my clients. But so you have two husband and wife, and they're each other's powers of attorney, right? They've kind of kept the kids at bay about all their health issues and all this kind of stuff. Well, one has now lost capacity, the other one, but the wife hasn't changed the order of the powers of attorney. So her impaired husband is still her decision maker if something happens to her, you know? And so we want to address those issues as the adult kids and go, wait a minute, this is probably the time one of us needs to step into the first role, bring dad in this case, to the situation. We would never make a decision without dad, but we don't want to leave dad with the responsibility that he no longer has the capacity to manage. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Again, it's families opening up where oftentimes the parents kind of keep everything tight and inside, and they cover for each other. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
One of the unique things about the Phoenix market, now this may not be in everybody's neighborhood, but here about a third of the seniors that live here have their kids with them. The rest of the seniors that live here, they've snowbirded and landed here and stayed, and their kids are elsewhere. So you only see your parents on New Year's or Christmas or Thanksgiving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So oftentimes we get a lot of calls from folks right after the holidays because they thought things were fine at home, but then when they got home, they realized mom's covering for dad a lot.
Yeah.
And dad's not getting out of that chair all day, or dad answers every question you ask him, but he doesn't initiate conversations anymore. He's becoming internal in his cognition. So there's a lot of covering, and you understand why. Spouses love each other, they've lived together, they've been married, they've been laying next to each other for 60 years. They don't want anything to tear that apart.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, that that disparity among those who are near their adult children and those who are not, because that was another thing I was going to ask about, for whether it's a person who is single without a spouse or without family close by. Those are very important considerations.
And there are industry representatives inside our connectors group to help those families. When there's no local family, you can hire care management. You can get appointed um, guardian, conservator through licensed fiduciaries. All these things, but there's a way to help those families get the right kind of oversight when they're not here, if that's necessary.
Absolutely.
Um, what are the things that we call are the storm clouds, or even when is it time potentially for senior living? Frequent visits to the ER, the primary care physician becomes the emergency department many times. You're calling the first responders on a regular basis is part of that cycle. The city of Scottsdale, just that Urban, they're responding to over 100 calls a week for these kinds of just calls,
Wow.
falls, pickup, lift assist. Over 100 calls a week they deploy the trucks,
Wow.
and that's not Phoenix. It's a lot. So this is a real. If you know a loved one and they know what day Cody, the fireman's working, or what day Justin's working, that's bad. You've been there too many times.
Yes. Yes.
Um, the leading cause of death um, for these folks are falls and head injuries. Um, Early onset dementia is a greater problem than ever, and it is often missed and misunderstood, misinterpreted, because you don't expect somebody 57 years old to be diagnosed with the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease, but it's happening, and it's happening more frequently. Um, Diminished safety awareness is a big one. That's when you leave the stove on, you put stuff in the microwave for 30 minutes instead of 3 minutes or 30 seconds. It's those decision making skills are impaired. Additionally, attention to hygiene starts to go bad. Fellas don't want to shave. The girls are not taking care of their makeup and their face and their hair like they did. Bathroom habits become a problem. Another one is impaired judgment, decision making. Long before someone, and this can tie into the dementia point, long before people have big issues with their short-term memory and they're forgetful to a problem, oftentimes decision making and judgment and perceptions, those things are starting to alter, and they can be a signal that there's a bigger problem coming. And so usually as a family member, we react to those things. We get mad at our parents and we respond in emotional. And I implore people, and I'm talking to myself here, I got to sometimes step back and with some objectivity, look at what's going on here and understand that mom's ability to decide stuff is changed. It's not what it was. And
That could also make them susceptible to fraudulent activity as well.
all the time. And mom was a victim of, she got a phone call. This is Lieutenant so and so from Maricopa County. That's our county sheriff's department. We're on our way over to collect some debt that you have with the Internal Revenue Service. Well, they're preying on people to go into panic mode. Then they take directions. Mom goes over to Fry's, gets a bunch of iTunes gift cards, and $500 later, she's out $500,
Yes.
just like that. Medication errors get to be more and more of a problem with folks, of course, as they age. They have multiple healthcare issues in many cases, so You have two blood pressure pills, regulates your heart rhythm, a pill for your diabetes, a pill for your, it can be very confusing. Anxiety, antidepressant, pain medicine, on and on and on. So medication errors become an indicator that something needs to change or some help needs to come on board. Poor nutrition, hydration. Of course, people get tired of cooking for themselves. Their appetites suppressed. Usually they're eating less. They're eating frozen foods, more sodium, more easy to eat stuff. Nutritional values are going down. Um, Weight loss and dehydration can of course be a problem. Frequent UTIs or urinary tract infections can cause big problems. What we would never suspect as a younger person can be devastating as a UTI for an older person. Um, Once that doesn't get treated and it gets into the bloodstream, they could have multiple organ system failure and a condition in their brain called delirium urban that could be misinterpreted for dementia, but it's like an explosion of confusion and agitation, and that's what we call delirium, and that's a direct result of having a UTI that's not been treated. And when we see that they have frequent urinary tract infections, then their hygiene and they're getting dehydrated. Those are two signs that those issues are at hand. So again, it's a clue that we have to do something. And finally, caregiver burnout. If you live with someone who is very chronically ill or who has um, one of the dementias, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, vascular type, whatever, caregivers unfortunately often precede the one who has the dementia because the stress is so profound. It's so profound.
Right.
So
That, yeah, that I won't try to give an example just like you probably can throughout each one of these
yeah,
bullet points, but it it makes me think about certain client situations that I'm
of course.
encountering as we speak.
This is so real. I mean, this is not here's my 2 cents. Many years ago, I would say 30, 35 years ago here in Phoenix, because so many of us have swimming pools for our families in our backyards, the laws had not caught up yet to keeping those swimming pools safe. And so we watched on TV, especially in the summertime, week after week, kids in the pool, kids in the pool. And families were devastated when they lost a toddler in the pool. And so one of our local weathermen got on the air. I think his grandson was affected, and he used his platform to bring light to the issue. And he got corporate support dollars, and they started saying stuff, Urban, like, watch your kids around water. 2 seconds is too long. And now all of us have grown up with that and raised kids in that environment. We were super vigilant and way more tuned in to the danger of having a swimming pool when you had little kids. I believe the issues that we are addressing now is adult kids is every bit the same. It's so devastating to go through these things when it's your family, it's your mother, it's your father, it's your spouse. And my wife and I work together here at the Connectors business, and we came up with the phrase that we use with our clients. It's our turn now. As we talk to the adult kids, it's our turn now to care for those who loved and cared for us. It's our turn now. And that's really the perspective that we have about all this, is that we just want to equip families to be ready and how to get through this, because it's going to be a heck of a time.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember seeing this page, in advance of our meeting today, and the yeah, it sounds very familiar with
yeah,
the unpaid caregivers and those who have to balance
yeah,
their day-to-day lives, their work, their all other things around participating and being that caregiver, if they're even fortunate enough to be in the same location as
yeah,
their loved ones.
yeah, yeah. We can go to the next page. The employers are feeling this in a big way, Urban, because the employees are still working most cases, right? And they're having to take time off to take care of a lot of these things for their loved ones. Um, about 41 million Americans have provided unpaid care to an adult age 50 or older in the last, 12 months. Caregiver spends 24 hours a week providing that care. If I didn't own my own business, I would never be able to take off the time just in the last 2 weeks for mom. things that, and my wife was over there the day before, and my grandkids were over at mom's house helping her. You know what I mean? The hours that went into this are bananas, but this is what employers are feeling. And these are some of the statistics that back that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You can go to the next slide. Um, Caregivers are found in every generation. As I said, my own grandkids, her great grandkids, my grandkids were over there helping her. The COVID thing um, really pushed this whole thing forward. Financial financial hardships, regulatory standards have changed. More and more families don't have the dough, and so they are forced into the unpaid caregiver category because other things have happened in our lives in the last 5 years since the COVID pandemic. So, next slide. This is the direct economic impact, $44 billion. And for the indirect economic impact, this is difficult to ascertain, but Blue Cross Blue Shield came up with a number of $220 billion. So this is all, all of us that are the boomers. I'm in the bottom of the baby boomer generation. Um, you know,
Yeah.
we're here. So
Yes.
next slide. Yeah, next slide. Um, as I said, we only see our family sometimes once a year. What we don't, there's a lot of protection. What are we keeping? What are we hiding from them? What are the motives? And again, this denial, minimization, protection, self-protection, justification often leads to the big thing. You can keep moving here. I
Sure.
know we got to pick up the pace a little bit. What steps do I need to take? Do not run in fear. Get educated. Find people that know what they're doing and how to navigate this. This is not. I was seeing my mother's cardiologist with her the other day, and he's 82, and he says to her, "Whoever told us these were the golden ages haven't been to the golden ages yet. This is not golden." I encourage people to be courageous, and sometimes courageous is picking up the phone saying, "I don't know what I don't know, and I don't even know the questions to ask. Can you help me, please?"
Yeah.
And if they just tell me their story, often I can say, "I can help you here, 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 and here." You
Yeah.
know. So, but again, the human condition that we all experience is we often are proud. We are often ashamed or embarrassed to tell anybody I need help. And particularly have this problem. And so I don't have a sister. So I don't have a choice to throw this on my sister because usually the sisters are handling this instead of the fellas. But I don't have any sisters. So I'm out front as the oldest brother. But you got to let people know where you need the help.
Yeah. And planning where the bullet point, mentions planning when not in crisis is
Oh
critical.
my,
That goes the same for myself and my peers working with our clients. That's those who are preparing for retirement. Well, yeah, a plan or no plan at all is going to lead to, you know, potentially bad outcomes.
yeah,
Well, no different than planning for retirement, for planning post-retirement
right.
and for your later years is just as critical.
When you have a vision as an advisor the way you are, that you have the vision of how to take people's circumstances and point them towards a mutually agreed upon goal or a picture for their life, how they want to see it at that point when they get there. And likewise as an advisor, um we've helped, I don't know, 4,500 families find the finish line of assisted living, and I've helped another 5 or 10,000 just with resources. Or so I know the way. And if the people listen, as an advisor, you can give them a picture and ask them to trust you to see what they can't see yet for themselves. And I think that's where hard work and trust and all the right certifications and having longevity doing what you do earns their trust so that people will take your guidance. It's tough to do. It's tough to do.
Absolutely.
Um, the priorities here's the priorities: safety, you know, safety, falls, medication errors, hygiene, hydration, nutrition, travel. When should seniors stop driving?
Yeah.
These are the things that, look, when we were kids, my parents made some unpopular decisions about my safety when I was 14, and I didn't like it. And I thought I knew better. Yeah, well, now flip it. And at 61, I think I know better than my mom on some things about safety. Well, she don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so she has the same resistance to take direction at her age that I had when I was 14. So we have to understand the dynamic is turning, and we have to do it in love anyways, sometimes, and make those hard calls.
Absolutely.
Um, Communicate honestly, always in love, dignity, 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 and err on the side of dignity. It's very hard to do.
Yeah.
But that's, we all want that for ourselves. Um, please get educated. Please talk to people before the crisis. Have a great plan in place. Many diagnoses and conditions have predictable outcomes, including things like Alzheimer's disease. Be prepared. Allow somebody in so that we can help guide. We can give you resources. We can give you emotional strength. We can. It means a lot to connect to other people. Um, we can help you identify where you're going to have some bumps or turbulence along the way there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As I said earlier, the connectors business, after 20 years of providing services for just the placement service, Urban, I was giving people all this resources anyways. So we formally organized 3 years ago as the senior resource connectors to support, educate, and provide resources for the adult children primarily, and of course spouses who are struggling with the challenges of our aging loved ones. Um, we're all over the place. We speak to church groups, employers, social workers, discharge planners, financial advisors like yourself and your clients, or anywhere where we can connect to the masses. We're trying to educate people before the crisis so that they don't meet us for the first time at the bedside of the hospital.
Right. And see, and actually, I'll back up just a moment. I'll leave that there
Yeah.
for a second. But it mentioned monthly events and website. Will we see that later on in the slide so that those who are viewing this will have some contact information for you?
I think on my contact slide, our website is there. Um, Stacy, my wife, is our ambassador. She has a very active LinkedIn page. If you're a professional and you're on LinkedIn, you find Senior Resource Connectors on LinkedIn and follow us. I do a whole series of interviews, speaking to our experts in our coalition, Urban, that are on the pain points, that are not just advertisements for their business. I don't care about all that. What I want to talk to people is to expose where the pain points are, and we provide very specific conversations about that. So our website has dozens and dozens of videos and interviews and webinars and things that we've done. And we're creating new content all the time to be a resource for people.
Great. And I see, for those who are looking at the screen right now can see all the various categories that fall under the senior resource connectors, and
Yeah. Yeah.
quite a few. And if I may ask, with the on the right hand side where it says senior living, do you mind describing what those abbreviations mean for those who may not be aware?
Perfect. Yeah. So independent living, IL, assisted living, AL, MC is memory care. Um, is SNF behind there too? I've got the screen blocking that off. If they say SNF, yeah. SNF is SNF, or skilled nursing facility. So independent living is unlicensed senior living, or it's congregate living. Usually there's activities and meals and all kinds of resources and services in the building, but they are not licensed, and there's no care in that independent living. Now, it may be a freestanding independent living, or it may be part of a larger campus where they've got levels of care on the campus. There's no cookie cutter to what senior living looks like anymore, but that's what independent living is. Assisted living is licensed by your state under the state's Department of Health Services, and so they provide some health care to a standard that's outlined in the licensing. Arizona just fabulously. We don't lead the nation very often, many times, but in senior living, we have one of the most robust, super good assisted living laws that allow us to provide a lot of care for people in an assisted living or home environment, urban, and that helps keep folks from having to have that institutional skilled nursing experience that so many people are afraid of. That's a real fear. People, and I understand that. There's a lot of there was a lot of truth to that. That a lot of that end of life senior care was in a cold, institutionalized setting, and in today's world, particularly in Arizona, that is not the case. We can do end of life care all the way through assisted living in and get the right external support in there, and they don't have to move to a setting that isn't favorable to them. Memory care is assisted living that is trained specifically for memory care services. Any one of the forms of dementia, Alzheimer's being one of them and the most dominant, but there are dozens of forms of dementia, and memory care centers again can be part of an overall campus, or they can be freestanding memory care centers. And skilled nursing takes the form of either short-term rehab after someone has an illness or a surgery and their insurance pays for that. And then there are people that live in a skilled nursing setting for the long term and they pay, or their insurance pays for that long-term setting.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation on that.
Bet.
Any
You
other
bet.
comments you'd want to add regarding any of the other categories we've got on screen here?
No, I tell you, just from the time my mom moved here 9 years ago from Ohio, we've probably used just about each and every one of those services in the journey. And it's not just one, and it's not just one time. And so, and now she's found her home at assisted living, but she's receiving benefits on her health insurance from home health to do therapy and strengthening so that her legs and balance are better. Um, we've used everything, almost everything there. So, um, I just can't implore people enough. Here's our contact information, and I'm wondering, my email is there.
I do see
So
that.
our website, Urban, just for everybody to know, it's www.seniorresourceconnectors.com.
Great. And what is a main phone number that those who would want to reach out, what number would they call?
That number is I can.
Don't want your phone blowing up all over.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I should have that memorized, and I apologize. I would be happy to get that to you, and you want to send it out, or if you give me half a second, I'll have it for you. I can be back in 2 seconds.
Sure thing. Yeah,
Give
go
me
ahead.
1 second. Yep. Give me. I never call it. I just call my wife because she answers the phone. But it's here's the number for the office. You'll
Sure.
reach our advisor 602-698-9720. You can email us at info@seniorresourceconnectors.com. And our website has a connect with us button on it as well. LinkedIn
Excellent.
and Facebook are also live and very happy.
Very good. Very good. Just want to make sure that we've got there's
There's
Stacy's
Stacy. Yeah,
information.
she's the better half. Uh-huh.
And then it looks like we've got one more slide that might just, oh, there we go.
Well, there you go. Should have kept going.
No, it's all right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's probably the one you least need to remember because you got the contact otherwise. But just wanted to make sure that our viewers of the webinar had that information as
Thank you.
well that could reach out appropriately. So yeah, if I field any questions, I will certainly point them in your direction, or I'd certainly encourage any of those interested to reach out to Scott and his team directly.
We would love to talk, answer questions. That's what we're here for, is to help you before the crisis. So that means those questions are important. They mean something, and we'd love to hear from you if there's anything we can help you with.
Scott, thanks so much. Thanks for joining me today. And we'll certainly hope that will those who, eventually will need this help reach out.
Gotcha. I appreciate that, Urban. Thank you so much for having me today, and have a great afternoon.